topic this week is the 10 plagues. And as we go through it, I'm not going to mention it too many times, but those who learn with me Tanya, just pay attention that the whole fight over here of going out of exile is the fight how a Rasha becomes a Beinoni or a Rasha becomes a Tzaddik. Paro is the evil inclination, is the Nefesh HaBehamit. Moshe is the godly soul. I'm not going to, but you're going to see the parallels throughout the thing. So let's look at source number 1, page number 3. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, and God said to Moshe, Re'en taticha Elokim leparo, says, I have put you, I have made you into a master over Paro, ve'Aaron achicha yeh neviecha, and Aaron your brother will be your prophet. He will talk to him. אתה תדבר את כל אשר אצווך, you're going to speak in Hebrew everything that I will command you, ואהרון אחיך ידבר אל פרעה, and Aaron אחיך, Aaron your brother, he will speak to Paro. ושילח את בני ישראל, and then Paro is going to send the Jewish people מארצו, from his land. But I want you to know, ואני אקשה את לב פרעה, but I'm going to make Paro's heart hardened, והרביתי את אותותיי ואת מופתיי בארץ מצרים. And I'm going to make many signs, many miracles in the land of Egypt. Rashi says, ואני אקשה, and I'm going to harden his heart. So it says, it looks like the question is, it's not fair. What do you want from him? First you harden his heart and then you punish him. So Rashi explains, מאחר שהרשיע והתריס כנגדי, since he was evil and he was working against me, וגלוי לפניי שאין נחת רוח באומות לתת לב שלם לשוב, and I already know that the people amongst the nation don't return to God wholeheartedly, טוב שיתקשה ליבו, it is better that his heart will harden, למען ארבות בו אותותיי, so that I'm going to make many signs in him, ותכירו אתם את גבורתי. This is the strange part. Not that he will recognize my greatness. The whole idea of giving the 10 plagues has got nothing to do with Paro. Not to punish him, it's that you will recognize my greatness. Okay. וכן מידתו של הקדוש ברוך הוא, this is what Rashi explains, this is what the attribute of God. מביא פורענות על האומות, he brings troubles on the other nations, כדי שישמעו ישראל, so that the Jewish people are going to listen, ויראו, and they're going to fear God. שנאמר, because there's a verse that says in Zephaniah, הכרעתי גויים נשמו פינותם, it says, when I destroy the nation, make them desolate, אמרתי, why am I doing this? I said, אך תראי אותי, תיקחי מוסר. It says, the Jewish nation is going to see me, and they're going to learn how to behave from what I do to the other nations. Very nice. Page number 4, source number 2. So let's go and see the chronology of how the plagues happened and what we can learn from it. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, God said to Moshe, Emor el Aharon, say to Aharon, Kach matcha venatche yada al memei Mitzrayim, take your staff and put your hand on the water of Egypt. On what? Al naharotam, on the rivers, al yorehem, on their Niles, val agmehem, on the lakes, al kol mikve meimehem, on all the water that they have, ve'yu dam, and they're going to become blood. Ve'hayadam bechol eretz Mitzrayim, and they're going to be blood in the whole of the land of Egypt, ba'etzim, ba'avanim, in the trees, in the stones. Vayasu chen Moshe ve'Aaron, Moshe ve'Aaron listened to God, they did exactly that. Kasher tziva Hashem, just like Hashem commanded. Vayarem b'mateh, and he lifted his staff. Vayach et hamayim, Aaron lifted his staff, he hit the water. Asher bayeor, that is in the Nile, le'enei Paro ule'enei avodav, That he did to the eyes of Paro and to the eyes of his servants. ויהפכו כל המים אשר ביאור לדם, and all the water that's in the Nile turned into blood. והדגה אשר ביאור, what happened to the fish that are in the Nile? מתה, everything died. ויבאש היאור, and everything stunk. ולא יכלו מצרים לשתות מים מן היאור, and the Egyptian couldn't drink water from the Nile. ויהי אדם בכל ארץ מצרים, and there was blood in the entire land of Egypt. How long did that happen? So וימלא שבעת ימים, and it was filled 7 days, 1 week, אחרי הכות השם את היאור, after God hit the Nile, ויאמר השם אל משה, and God said to Moshe, בוא אל פרעה, it says, come to פרעה, ואמרת אליו, and you should say to him, כה אמר השם, so said God, שלח את עמי ויעבדוני, send my nation and they would serve me. ואם מאן אתה לשלח, and if you're going to refuse to send, הנה אנוכי נוגף את כל גבולך בצפרדעים. I'm going to bring you the second plagues, the plague of the frogs. Let's look at what Rashi says about this verse. Rashi says, וימלא מניין שבעת ימים, and it was filled the length of 7 days. What is it? Rashi explains to us, שלא שב היאור לקדמותו, that the Nile took it a week to return from blood into water. שהייתה המכה משמשת רביעי חודש. So this is what used to be with most of the plagues, as we're going to see. How long did it take? This whole process took like 7-8 months. This whole process of the whole plagues. We think it came one after another, but it didn't. It wasn't so quick. It was usually 1 week every plague, and 3 weeks he let Paro think about it. שהיה מכה משמשת רביעי חודש, every plague used to be a quarter of the month, which is 1 week, וגימל חלקים, and 3 weeks, היה מעיד ומתרה בהם. He used to warn them. He used to warn the Egyptian, you saw the last plague? You know what's going to happen to you now? You better change your ways. That was the way. And that way it took a long, long time. The Rebbe comes and asks us a question now. נשאלת שאלה פשוטה. We have a simple question that can be asked right over here. What is the question? מכיוון שהמטרה של ריבוי האותות, it says, what was the idea of making so many plagues? It says, because he wanted the Jewish people to recognize, right, to learn from what happening to the Egyptians. He wanted to learn how to behave the right way. That's what we learned before. He שתכירו את גבורתי. It says, the Jewish people needed to recognize his greatness. So the Rebbe says, אין המובן. I don't understand. I don't understand. If that's the reason, או מהו הצורך ש10 המכות יהיו במשך זמן ממושך כל כך? Why do you need the 10 plagues to be over almost a year? Why do you need to make it for such a long time? They were going to see the miracles week after week, quickly, one after another. You can finish the whole thing in 2 months. Why wait a year? המכה משמשת רביעי חודש, ו3 חלקים היה מעיד ומתרה בהם. Like it says over here, the plague itself was for 1 week, and then 3 weeks he used to warn them. So that all of that is כדי לפעול שישמעו ישראל ויראו. All of that is for the Jewish people to feel, to see the might of God. You don't need so much time. אין צורך שתהיה המכה משמשת רביעי חודש. Even the fact that the plague lasted for a week, even that's not necessarily. And if it would last for 3 hours, wouldn't they think it's a miracle? Wouldn't they see the power of God? Obviously they would see the power of God with 3 hours. Not 3 hours, 24 hours. Not 24 hours, 48 hours. But what do you need a week for? And especially after that, you need a week for the plague, and then for the plague itself you don't even need a week. And then for the warning, you don't even need a warning. That's not what it says. But it says that the idea is not for the Egyptians, it's for us. So for us, you don't need it. But that's not what Rashi says. Rashi says the whole idea is for whom? Not for Paro. it's for us. That's what Rashi says. Ela maspik yom echad. It says it's enough one day. One day, 24 hours, you give the plague. ולכל היותר 2 או 3 ימים. If you want, you give 2 days, 3 days. ועל אחת כמה וכמה שאין צורך בשלושה חלקים. And for sure you don't need to warn Paro for 3 more weeks afterwards. What are you like? What are we supposed to, how do we supposed to understand this? נוספים 3 שבועות בין כל מכה ומכה. For sure we don't need the 3 weeks between each and every plague. So let's continue. כפי שאכן מצינו בנוגע לסיום המכות. And it says, how do I know this? It says, because the last 3 plagues came boom, boom, boom. Came one after another. It's only the first 7 plagues that were like this. The last 3 plagues was very, very quick. Yeah? שלא לקח משך זמן כל כך כבשאר המקום. בנוגע למכת מחורות, and especially the plague of the firstborn, המכה התרחשה ברגע אחת. You know how long it took for the plague of firstborn? He could have killed them throughout a week. But he didn't kill them throughout a week. He killed them in 1 millisecond. Midnight came, boom, they're all dead. Says, why not? You should wait a week for it. כמו כן, בנוגע להתראה של מכת בכורות, it says, and it's also when it comes to the warning of the plague of the firstborn, שהתרה בו פעם אחת בלבד. In all the other plagues, Moshe was going in and out to Paro. Says, maybe you changed your mind, maybe you thought about it again, maybe this, maybe this. מכת בכורות, it was 1 in, 1 out, that's it. בעמדו לפני פרו, נאמרה לו נבואה זו. It says, when he, Moshe, was standing in front of Paro, God told him this prophecy. שהרי מי שיצא לפניו לא הוסיף עוד ראות פניו. We know this because once he left Paro, he never saw him again. Paro says, if you remember, I don't want to see your face again. ואם כן, מהו הצורך בשהות זמן ממושכת במכות שלפני זה? So what we're going to try to understand, if the purpose of the plagues is for the Jewish nation and not for the Egyptians, why do we need such a long time? The whole thing could have taken 2 weeks, or even less maybe. Could take, it says, 10 days, and I can finish the whole day. You don't need like 7-8 months for it, like it did take. והעיקר, and it says, and furthermore, שבמשך כל אותו זמן, that throughout that entire time, which means a month for each plague, היו בני ישראל צריכים להתעכב בגלות מצרים. Specifically now, they were still in exile. Throughout, they were still idle, they were still doing whatever they are. They were still slave, let's call it this way. If they had slavery or not, we'll see soon. But they were still under the influence of the Egyptians. Why keep them under the influence of the Egyptians if you could take them out tomorrow? There's no purpose in it. There's no purpose to keep them there for another 6 months. And if you're saying it's for the Jewish people, what do you mean? For the Jewish people, the purpose is to keep them another 6 months? Doesn't make sense at all. So the Rebbe continues. Omnam, it says the truth is that they were not slaved anymore. They were not enslaved anymore since the first plague. בראש השנה בטלה עבודת מאבותינו. It says in the first plague, they stopped, after the first plague hit, the Egyptians stopped enslaving them. They were not slaved anymore. But they were still what? They were still under the occupation of the Egyptians, like they say. חצי שנה לפני צאתם מצרים. This was 6 months before they left Egypt. אבל גם לאחרי כן היו בגלות מצרים. But even afterward, they were still exiled in Egypt. במעמד ומצב שלא היה עבד יכול לברוח ממצרים. Think about it like in Russia. Maybe they didn't kill the Jews anymore in Russia. But in the 1970s, tried to go out of Russia. You couldn't. Russia kept the Jews. The Jews trust me, did not feel free in Russia at that time, in the 1970s. And it was much worse in Egypt. במשך חצי שנה חורף שלם. Why is God keeping them for another 6 months over there? What is God trying to accomplish? Page number 7. והביאור בזה. The explanation. הבן 5 למקרא, it's a 5-year-old, מבין בפשטות, he understands in simple matters, שכל מכה ומכה פעלה דבר מסוים אצל פרעה ואצל מצרים. Every plague accomplished something. It wasn't just a quick thing. Every plague did something to the Egyptians. Or like in Tanya, every plague fixed the evil inclination to some degree. Let's see how. אמנם גם לאחרי כמה וכמה מכות, it's true that even after many plagues, לא הסכים פרעה לשלוח את בני ישראל למצרים. פרעה still didn't let the Jewish people go out of Egypt. In other words, the evil inclination, the nefesh behamit, according to the Tanya, still was saying, I'm in control over here, not you. But it learned something in the 6 plagues. We're trying to understand, what did it learn? What did Paro learn during these plagues? אבל אף על פי כן, but nevertheless, בוודאי נפעלה פעולה מסוימת על ידי כל מכה ומכה. We're going to try to understand what every plague did. What lesson did every plague did that it to Paro, and what lesson did the Jewish people learn from the plague? So let's see. Let's see at blood, source number 3, page 7. The verse says, הנה אנוכי מקם במטה אשר בידי על המים אשר ביאור ונהפכו לדם. It says Aaron is going to eat with the staff on the Nile, and the water of the Nile are all going to turn into blood. That's the verse. And Rashi says, Rashi explains this. And we're going to see the first thing that God did to Paro, the first lesson that the Jewish learned, and the first lesson that the evil inclination learned. ונהפכו לדם, and they turned into blood. So Rashi says, לפי שאין גשמים יורדים במצרים. We all know that in Egypt there was no rain. ונילוס עולה ומשקה את הארץ. And the Nile would go up and water the land. In other words, they used to get the sustenance from the river and from the Nile. And why did they think that Paro was God? Is because if you remember last week's Parsha, when Yaakov came down to Egypt, actually it's 2 weeks ago, when Yaakov came down to Egypt, there was a famine in Egypt. So it says, what do you mean a famine in Egypt? How can it be a famine? It's the only country that is watered not by the rain, it's watered by the Nile. So it says the Nile stopped going up at that time. And Yaakov gave, when he came to Egypt, he gave a special blessing to Paro. And the blessing he gave to Paro was, may the Nile come up to you. This is a Jewish trait that all the sages have. We know when Yaakov went into the well, the water came up to him. We know that Eliezer, every time Moshe came to the well, the water came up to him. Yeah, with Rivka, it's a Jewish trait. So he gave that blessing to Paro. So instead of Paro saying, thank you for that blessing that you gave me, what did Paro say? I am God. That's what Paro learned to do from it. I am God. And now Pharaoh treated, since the Nile, the sustenance of Egypt, comes through me, I am the God of all of Egypt. ומצרים עובדים לנילוס, and the Egyptians used to bow down to the Nile. It was their idol worship, because that was the sustenance. They used to get the sustenance from the Nile. לפיכך, and here Rashi explains, you know how you start to battle against the evil inclination? It says, it wasn't just Paro and the Egyptians that thought that the sustenance came from the Nile. That wasn't the problem. It wasn't the problem that Paro and the Egyptians are thinking that the sustenance is coming to the Nile. Or let's say it in Tanya terms, it wasn't just the evil inclination, thinking that the sustenance comes from business. I am doing the business. It's me who's doing everything. I'm the power. It wasn't just that. The person started believing in it. It says, who started believing in it? The Jewish people. The Jewish people themselves. That's the way they believe. They believe. It says that Jewish people were just as much idol worshippers as the Egyptians. It was their idol also. The Nile was the Jewish idol also at the time. So the first thing that God did is what? He had to show the Jewish people He had to show the Jewish people that what? That the Nile is not God. Yeah, there's a higher power than the Nile. So therefore, Hilkait Iratam. So therefore, he hit their God. ואחר כך הלקה אותם. And then we're going to see he also damaged them. Let's see. ולדוגמה, for the example, במכת דם, when it comes to the plague of blood, מפרש Rashi explains, לפיכך הלקה את עירתם. This is why he hit their idol. היינו, שמכת דם הכתה את העבודה הזרה של פרעה ומצרים. That the plague of blood hit the idol of Paro, the idol of Egypt, וכדי שהפעולה תהיה בכל התוקף, and so that the punishment is going to be very strong, המכה הייתה צריכה להימשך משך זמן. It needed to continue for a long time. Why for a long time? כדי שיהיה זמן להתבונן בנעשה ולהפנים את זה. So that the people are going to be able to what? To internalize it. And they needed to internalize that there's something more powerful than the idol worship of Egypt. It's not enough to do it quick, one thing after the other. Let's see. ויש להוסיף בזה, and we have to add, על פי דברי המדרש, עוד פעולה שפעלה מכת דם על המצרים והיהודים. There's another thing the Midrash says, that this plague of blood caused both the Egyptians and the Jews. The Jews at that time, think about what was the mental state. The mental state is that they are not second-class citizens, they are sixth-class citizens. They're completely down on the bottom of the row. That was the mentality. That's the way the Egyptians used them. So let's look in source number 4. This is from the Midrash. Amar Rabbi Avin Alevi Berabi. Rabbi Avin said, Mimakat dam he'eshiru Israel. It says, from the plague of blood, the Jewish people became rich. It says, what do you mean? Keitzad, how? המצרי וישראל בבית אחד, you can have an Egyptian and a Jew sitting in the same house, והגיגית מלאה מים, and they had a bucket full of water. ומצרי הלך למלות הקיטון, Egyptian took a cup and filled it, מוציאה מלאה דם, he took out a cup full of blood. וישראל שותה מים מתוך הגיגית, and the Jew is drinking water from inside the same bucket. והמצרי אומר, תן לי בידך מעט מים. So the Egyptian says, hey, if a Jew touches it, maybe they've got special hands. I don't know. Jews are special people. They've got different DNA maybe. I don't know. So he tells the Jew, you know what? You take it in your hand. You take the water in your hand, and I'll drink it from your hand. That's what the Egyptian tells the Jew. ונותן לו. So the Jew gave him a little bit water in his hand. ונעשו דם, and as soon as he comes, his lips touches the water, this water turns into blood. So then he says to him, you know what, I have another trick. Let's take a cup, אומר לו, נשתה אני ואתה מן קערה אחת. Let's put the cup in one bucket, and we're going to drink from 2 straws, let's say. Yeah? At the same time, I'm going to drink from one side, you're going to drink from the other side. So what happened? Israel shote mayim, the Jew would drink water, והמצרי דם, and the Egyptians blood. And this is going to take, for how long this is happening? For 7 days. If it happened for 1 day, not the end of the world. You can get along without drinking for 1 day. 2 days, maybe. But for 7 days, for sure you can't get along. So what happened? The Mitzri thought, hey, it's a problem. But they figured out, they saw that what? כשהיה לוקח מישראל בדמים, that if he would buy it from the Jew with money, what will happen? היה שותה מים. Once it belongs to the Jew, and the Jew sold it to him, then it was water. מכאן העשירו ישראל. It says, from here, the Jewish people became rich. The Rebbe says on page 9, ומובן גדול הפעולה שבדבר על המצרים. So now think what happened to the Egyptians. after the plague. It wasn't just that the idol worship was gone. All of a sudden, every Egyptian, no matter who he was, no matter how he was, he knew that what? That a Jew is better than him. He needs the Jew. Without the Jew, what happens to him? He's dead. And it's not so much for the Egyptian. You know who it was really for? For the Jew himself. The Jew that until now thought he was a third-class citizen, all of a sudden, everybody comes over to him, running after him, give me this, I'll give you as much money as you want. All of a sudden he becomes important. Yesterday he was the low life of the congregation, now he is almost like a king. Everybody is running after him, giving him money, throwing money at him. שאפילו שהיהודי הוא עבדו של המצרי. And it's not like, and think about what's happening here. The Jews were slaves of the Egyptian at that time. שהעביד אותו עבודת פרך. The Egyptian made him work hard labor. הנה בשעה שהיה צמא. Nevertheless, when the Egyptian was thirsty, you know what happened? הוכרח לקחת את כספו. He had to take his money. שבו היה יכול לקנות חיי נפשו. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to drink. He wouldn't be able to be alive. ולתתו ליהודי כדי לרוות את סימונו. He had to give his money to the Jew in order to be satiated. דבר זה פעל גם, it says, it's not just, you can see the effect on the Egyptian nation. It had a whole shift happen in that thing. It wasn't just a small little thing, a plague that we think and nothing happened. The whole mindset of the entire nation, both Jews and the Egyptians, and even the Egyptian sorcerers, changed at that moment. דבר זה פעל גם על חרטומי מצרים, כי אף הם היו צמאים. It says, even the sorcerers were thirsty. מכה זו, but remember one thing, even though the sorcerers were thirsty, they weren't impressed. Why they weren't impressed? Why Paro wasn't impressed? Because the sorcerers could also turn water into blood. It wasn't something that only the Jews, only Moshe and Aaron could do. The sorcerers could only do it, could also do it. But they were still stuck. The fact that they could do it didn't mean anything. They still need water. And the only water that was available was to get it from the Jews. מכה זו פעלה גם על היהודי שנוכחו לראות את מעלתם. This caused the Jews to see their advantage. אפילו כשהמצרי אמר לישראל, even when the Egyptian told the Jew, נשתה אני ואתה מן קרעה אחת, let's drink from the same bucket, as we said before, ישראל שותה מים ומצרי דם, the Jew would drink water and the Egyptian would drink blood, רק כאשר הוא שילם על כך, הוא יכול היה לשתות מים. Only after he paid, he was able to drink the water. עד כדי כך שעל ידי זה השאירו המצרים את ישראל. This is the first time where the Jews started to take the money out of the Egyptians. That's right, that was the first cash out. So we see what the first plague did. It completely changed the whole mindset of both Jews and the Egyptians. Let's go to the second plague. ויית אהרון את ידו על מימי מצרים. It says, and Aaron put his hand on the water of Egypt. ותל הצפרדע, and the frogs came up. ותכס את ארץ מצרים, and it filled the entire land of Egypt. It says, what's going on over here? What is the lesson over here? It says, במכת צפרדעים היה עניין עמוק יותר ממה שהמכת דם. The plague of frogs is much deeper than the plague of blood. How? משום שהמכה באה מהעבודה זרה שלהם עצמה. Because it's their idol who grew the frogs, who sustained the frogs, who gave life to the frog. The frogs came from their idol. It's like their idol gave birth to the frog. You see, in the first plague, the people were not bothered.
Their idol, which idol?
The Nile. The Nile grew the frogs.
Oh.
The Nile grew the frogs. It came from the Nile, yeah. The idol grew it. In the first plague, the people were not affected by the plague. The Nile was affected, and the people were affected indirectly. Over here, their idol themselves, instead of sustaining them, it was causing them harm. It was bringing them harm. ולרוב הפשיטית לא הוצרך רש"י לפרשו. It says, let's see what's happening. This is the second plague. The second plague, what happened? Instead of just, like I said, the Nile itself getting hurt, the Nile itself was harming the Egyptians already. It was making their life inconvenient. Their own God go against them, which didn't happen in the first one. It was just hit. Let's see in the third one, which is lice. What happened in the lice? It says, Vayet Aaron et yado, and Aaron. And by the way, Paro was not impressed with the frogs either. Why wasn't he impressed? Because the Egyptians were able, the sorcerers were able to do exactly the same thing. So he says, he says to Moshe, all you show me is that you're a better sorcerer than them. But that there's a God? I'm not convinced there's a God. I'm still the God, not you. That there's another God, I'm still not convinced. So let's see the plague of lice. Source number 6 on page 10. Vayet Aaron et yado b'matehu, and Aaron took the staff in his hand, vayach et afar haaretz, and he hit the earth of the ground. Vatihi akinam ba'adam u'b'nai, there's lice in men and in the animals. Kol afar haaretz haya kinim b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. The entire land was covered with lice. V'ya'asu chen achartumim belatem, and here comes, you see, a third stage. There's a third stage coming over here. Until now, the sages, the sorcerers were able to do every plague. Maybe not as good as Moshe and Aaron, but they were able to do it. Over here, they tried to do it. ויעשו כן החרטונים בלעתיהם להוציא את הכנים ולא יכולו. But the sorcerers tried to do the same trick with the lice, and they weren't able. ויאמרו החרטומים, this is the first time that the advisors of the evil inclination, the advisors of Paro, are coming to Paro, and they're telling him, Etzba Elokim hi. Now we admit, we can see that there's godliness over here. We are not capable of doing this at all. In other words, there is a power over here which is above us, above the power that we can connect to. It's already a third stage. Ad az Paro ta'an, until that moment, Paro said, Shehu atzmo Elokim. Until that moment, not only Paro said that he was God, the sorcerers also believed that Paro was the God. אז אך דווקא מכה זו פעלה עליו ועל חרטומיו להודות בכך שזה אצבע אלוקים. This caused Paro and his sorcerers to admit, there's something else over here. There's something here that we cannot do. There's something here above nature, above our abilities. There's another, you can see there's another stage that happened over here. Let's see the next one. In source number 7, it's not the next one, but it's quite down the line. It's the 7th one. So it says, when it comes to the plague of hail, we have another thing that happened. Another stage happened. What happened in the plague of hail? So it says, Hineni mamtir ka'et machar. Moshe comes in front of Paro, and he says, I'm going to bring tomorrow barad kaved meod, a very heavy hail. Asher lo haya kamohu b'Mitzrayim, that there was never like this one in Egypt. Lemin hayom hivasdavad ata, from the day it was created until now. Ve'ata, and now, this is the warning to Paro, shlach ha'ez et miknecha ve'et kol asher lecha basodeh. It says, take everything, all the animals that you have in the fields, kol ha'adam va'behema, whether your servants who are in the field, whether the animals who are in the field, asher yimatzeh basodeh, anybody that is going to be found in the field, ve'lo ya'asef habayta, and you're not going to take him into the house, vayarad alehem barad v'metu, and the hail will come down upon them and they will die. And then look what happened. Look what happened. There's a completely different mindset over here. You know who behaved once the Egyptian heard what Moshe said to Paro? You know what the Egyptians did? Look inside. Hayareh dvar Hashem me'avdei Paro. There were even Egyptians who started believing in God. Even the Egyptians. Until now, they trusted Paro and the sorcerers. They told the Paro and the sorcerers, you know what? We believe what Moshe said. We had 7 other plagues until now. This plague is coming. We trust this guy. We trust this God. We know what's going to happen. So those who believed in God, הניס את עבדיו ואת מקנהו לבתים. They took their servants and their animals into their houses so that they're going to be protected from the hail. So it says, the Rebbe explains, it says, גם קודם לכן חלק מהמצרים היו יראים מהשם. It says, it wasn't just that it happened in the 7th plague that some Egyptians were afraid of God. Some had the awe of God even before the 7th plague. So what happened? Just like people in the Tanya. Some people have the awe of God, yeah? But the fact that they have the awe of God, that doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to behave in a certain manner. Over here, they didn't just have the awe. Everybody believes in God. The fact to believe in God, actually in the beginning, they didn't believe in God at all. But to believe in God, to believe in God, that doesn't mean you're going to do something about it. Over here, you're going to do something about it. It's a completely different stage again. גם קודם לכם חלק מהמצרים היו יראים מהשם. Also before that, a few of the Egyptians had the awe of God. אך זה לא התבטא בפעולה ממשית, but they didn't behave in such a manner. במכת ברד, in the plague of ברד, of hail, יראת עבדי השם מהשם השפיע עליהם ברמה המעשית. They did not just have an awe of God in their mind, it also caused them to behave in a different manner. You know, everybody says they believe in God, but does everybody do exactly what God says? That's something else. That's even a harder thing. That means more going out of Egypt, one more step. הירא דבר השם, over there it says, those who had the awe of God, הניס את עבדיו ואת מקנהו. They brought their slaves and their animals into the house. And then we have another stage. What's the next stage? What can be higher than this? So it says the next stage is the stage of locusts. Source number 8. It says, ויבוא משה ואהרון אל פרעה ויאמרו אליו. Both Moshe and Aaron came to Paro and they said to him, כי אם אין אתה לשלח את עמי, if you're going to refuse to send my nation, הנה נמביא מחר הרבה בגבולך. I'm going to bring the next tomorrow locust in your country. וכיסה את עין הארץ, and this locust will cover all the land, ולא יוכל לראות את הארץ, and nobody will be able to see the land. ואכל את יתר הפלטה נשארת לכם מדברן, and whatever is left from the hail, that locust is going to eat. ואכל את כל העץ הצומח לכם מן השדה, it's going to eat all the trees. ויפן ויצא מעם פרעה, and he turned and he left Paro. And look what happens over here. This didn't happen until then. Until then, the advisors of Paro, what did they advise him? Until then, they were gung-ho with Paro. All of a sudden, even the advisors of the evil inclination, Tanya, even the advisors, ויאמרו עבדי פרעה אליו, and even the advisors of Paro said to him, עד מתי יהיה זה לנו למוקש? It says, until when we're going to suffer from this Moshe and Aaron? שלח את האנשים. It says, send the men. ויעבדו את השם אלוקיהם, so that they could serve the God their Lord. הטרם תדע כי עבדה מצרים. Don't you see we lost the battle? It's already lost. By the way, men, just going back to Tanya, send the men. Man is chokhmah. You remember? It says, chokhmah, give it to the godly soul. I want to keep what? the emotions and the actions stays with me, which means the women and the children, love and fear, are staying behind. The evil inclination says, you know what, you can learn Torah, but I'm controlling the emotions. I'm controlling the zeal. Like the Beinoni of the Tanya. I'll control your emotion. You're not going to become a tzaddik. Yep. Vayushav et Moshe v'et Aaron el Paro, and this was returned to Moshe and Aaron. Vayomer elehem, and he said to them, Lechu ivdu et Hashem Elokechem. It says, go. Okay, now the evil inclination, Paro is already willing to say, go. I'm willing for you to go. But, mi v'mi haolchim, I want you to know who is going. Vayomer Moshe, and Moshe said, our entirety is going. Bena'areinu, bizkeneinu nelech, with our children, with our elders, we're going to go. Bevanenu bivnotenu, with our sons, with our daughter, with Ava and Ira. Betzonenu bivkareinu, with the sheep and with the cattle, even with you. Even with evil inclination, we're going to go serve the godly. Nelech ki chag Hashem lanu, because this is a holiday for us. Vayomer alehem, and he refused. Paro says, what is this nonsense? Lochen, it says, this is not how people behave. Where did you see women and old people and babies serving? Well, I know who's serving. I've been to idol worship places. The men serve. The women are at home raising children. They don't have time to be priests. Lechu na hagvarim ve'ivdu et Hashem. It says, I allow the men to go and serve God. So the Rebbe explains, Omnam hahatra'a al makat harbe. It says the fact that Moshe warned Paro with the plague of locust, לא פעלה על פרו שישוב לגמרי בתשובה. Paro did not do complete tshuva, complete repentance. וישחרר את כל עם ישראל ממצרים, so that he will send the entire nation out of Egypt. But you can see he did something more than before. אך היא פעלה עליו תשובה למחצה, he did half תשובה. הוא הסכים שלפחות הגברים ילכו. You can see, he says, the godly soul, you can control what? Learning Torah, you can control nothing else. The emotions, I'm still controlling. דבר שלא הסכים עליו עד עתה, things that he did not admit until now. ועל דרך זה, כל מכה ומכה פעלה פעולה מיוחדת בנוסף על מה שנפעל עד עתה. And we don't have the time to go through each and every one of this, but you should know that every plague accomplished something within Egypt. So now, על פי זה מובן בפשטות, now we're going to understand the question that we asked in the beginning. שהיה צריך להיות מכות נפרדות, that we needed 10 different plagues. It couldn't be just one. ומשך זמן בין מכה למכה, and we needed time between each and every plague. Why? כדי שיוכלו המצרים להתבונן בפעולתה של המכה ולהסיק מסקנות. It says that both the Egyptians and the Hebrews can internalize what's happening. One stage builds on the next. It takes time for you to realize, a lot of us realize something, right? In our life, many times, many occasions. But it takes a time until it becomes internalized and we behave according to it. Not immediately when we understand something, we act accordingly. We see in ourselves, it takes time. And this is the time that God allocated for people to internalize what is actually happening so they will be ready for the next stage. אם כל מכה הייתה נמשכת זמן קצר, if every plague would have happened a short time, ללא הפסק זמן בין מכה למכה, without time between one plague and another, לא היה להם מספיק זמן להתבונן במשמעות המכות. They wouldn't be able to internalize what's happening. והמכות לא היו פועלות השפעתם. And they wouldn't have learned the lessons from them. ובעניין זה יש הוראה ולימוד בעבודת השם. From here we see something that we can learn from it itself. For page 13. We can learn it when we work with other people, and more importantly, we can learn it when we work with ourselves. Many times, we read, we learn, we understand things, and we say to ourselves, well, I've been reading, learning, understanding, for the past 10 years, and what? And I'm the same guy as before. I didn't change. I didn't internalize. What's going on over here? I know, I understand, and how do I behave? Do I behave like I understand? No, I behave like my old ways. The fact that I understand doesn't necessarily change me. That's what we would think. And this is what we do to ourselves, and this is what we do with other people. We tell them, we help them, we bring them closer to Judaism. And what? And nothing. We talk until we're red in the face. So what? They do whatever they want to do. It's not that they don't understand. They understand. And they still do whatever they want to do. So it says, כאשר עוסקים בהפצת התורה והיהדות והפצת האמת החוצה, when we are busy bringing godliness out into this world, קורה לפעמים שמרגישים שלמרות שדיברו עם יהודי פלוני, sometimes we talk to another Jew, sometimes that other Jew is us, we talk to ourselves, וניסו להשפיע עליו, and we try to influence, לא הצליחו לפעול ולא כלום, we don't do nothing, we talk, and nothing is happening on the other side, both to us and to other people. על כך באה ההוראה מהאמור לעיל פשוטו של מקרא. This is what we can learn from the story of the plagues. שגדולה מזו מצינו אפילו בנוגע לפרעה מלך מצרים. That we see this even when it comes to פרעה, the king of Egypt. הן אמת שגם לאחרי שפרעה קיבל כמה וכמה מכות. We see, פרעה received all the plagues. 9 plagues, 8 plagues, 7 plagues, and what? And he still wasn't convinced. לא ראו אצלו הזזה כלשהי. You didn't see, hey, it's still evil power, the same power that we had in the beginning, we have in the end. What's going on over here? What did all the plagues do? Nothing. שהרי בנוגע לפועל לא קיים פרעה את ציווי הקדוש ברוך הוא. In the end, Paro didn't do what God asked, שלח את עמי ויעבדוני. He didn't send the nation and they served me. והמשיך לטעון, and he continued to say to Moshe, לי יאורי ואני עשיתי את זה, I'm still God. כבתחילה, just like in the beginning. אבל אף על פי כן, על ידי כל מכה ומכה נפעלה אצלו פעולה מסוימת. But nevertheless, maybe you didn't notice, every plague did something to him. You didn't see it until the last one, but it must have been, because everyone did something in order to accomplish that by the last one, he will send them. So if this we're talking about an evil king like Paro, over here we're talking about ourselves, and we're talking about other Jews, how much more so we can influence them. ואם הדברים אמורים בנוגע לפרעה מלך מצרים, just like we said that it has to be with Paro, the king of Egypt, ולפני מתן תורה, and this is before מתן תורה, where we don't have the power of the Torah, כאשר הייתה גזירה עליונים לירדו למטה והתחתונים לירדו למעלה, when godliness could not permeate the earth so much as now, הרי בנוגע ליהודי, when it comes to us, that we see we've been learning and we've been doing, we're not changing, sometimes we give up. We give up. He says, it's not going. We're like Paro. We're staying the same. Yeah? ובפרט לאחרי מתן תורה, you should know that specifically now, since it is after מתן תורה, לאחר ביטול הגזרה, בוודאי ובוודאי, how much more so, and for sure, page 14 at the top, שכל פעולה בפעולה, that every action that we take towards ourselves and towards others, בקשר לענייני תורה ויהדות, as long as it has to do with Torah and mitzvahs, אינה חוזרת ריקם חס ושלום. It is impossible that it doesn't have an effect. There's no such thing as a person, you come to me and says it doesn't have an effect. אלא פועלת פעולתה בנוגע לפועל ממש. It has its effect for sure. ובפשטות, כאשר מדברים יהודי בדברים היוצאים מן הלב, when we talk to another Jew from our heart, אודות ענייני יהדות, תורה ומצוותיה, we talk to him about Torah or commandments, ענייני מוסר ויראת שמיים, matters of Judaism, and we do it בדרכי נועם ובדרכי שלום. This is the most important. We don't preach, we don't shout, we don't scream, we do it in a peaceful manner. כמובן לא ייתכן שדברים אלו, for sure, such words, לא יפעלו את פעולותם, for sure they're going to have their effect. ובמילא, גם אם אינו רואה את הפעולה תכף ומיד, and even if you don't see the effect immediately, אומרים לו, אל תבט אל מראהו. It says, don't look the way he's looking right now. שכן בוודאי ובוודאי נפעלה אצלו איזו פעולה. Because for sure, it happened, something affected the other person or yourself. אלא שבזה עצמו ישנם כמה אופנים. But in itself, it has many stages. שלפעמים, it says, so what's the problem? How come it didn't have an effect? How come he doesn't behave the right way? How come we don't behave the right way? שלפעמים יש צורך בשהות זמן להתבוננות. Because sometimes it takes time. Some people can do it in 2 hours. Some people do it in 2 weeks. Some people need to think about it for 2 years. And some people need to think about it for 25 years. Some people need to think about it 200 years. They don't have 200 years. But that's the amount of time. But for sure it does something. There's no such thing as it's not going to do something. עד שהדבר יבוא לידי פועל בגילוי ממש. ומה שטוען שאינו רואה את הפעולה, and from the fact that he says he doesn't see the effect, either on himself or on somebody else, אומרים לו, הסיבה לכך שאינך רואה מכיוון שמסתכל אתה בעיני בשר. It says the reason we don't see it because you're looking with physical eyes. תתעלה קימה, elevate yourself a little bit, become a little bit more spiritual, and then you're going to see the inside of a Jew, ותיווכח שנפעלה אצלו פעולה, and you're going to understand that he did cause something by him, ותוסיף לפעול יותר ויותר, and that will going to motivate you to do more and more. עד שסוף כל סוף רואים את הפעולה באופן גלוי, until you'll be able to see the action in a revealed manner. I just like to tell you a story, it's a beautiful story, about actually what we've learned right now. There's a shliach in Florida, his name is Rabbi Katz. Rabbi Katz usually stands in Florida in the heat. He has a place where he puts on tefillin. You know, it's like next to the tourist people, where all the people go. Everybody knows Rabbi Katz is there all the time, sweating, hot, all the time. You can imagine Florida in the summer. Everybody been there, yeah? And he's standing over there and asking a Jew, are you Jewish? The guy says yes. And he says, do you want to put tefillin? The guy says yes or no. And that's what he does all day long. That's his Indian over there in Florida. So there was, actually there's a YouTube, I'm going to send you this YouTube thing from this person who actually, there was a Jewish person who actually went to NYU, to the Jewish University in New York. What is it called? The famous one. Yeshiva University, that's right. He was in Yeshiva University. But after he finished Yeshiva University, he used to be a religious person, moved down to Florida, and he stopped doing everything. He didn't put on tefillin, Shabbos didn't keep, nothing pretty much, kashrus, nothing. So one day he's passing by this Rabbi Katz, and Rabbi Katz asks him, are you Jewish? So he says, yes. So he says, did you put on tefillin today? So obviously he didn't put on tefillin, but he didn't feel like putting on tefillin. So he told him, yeah, I put it on this morning. And he continued to walk. Yeah? And that's it. Rabbi Katz, for him it was a no, and the guy is, oh, so he's continuing to walk. When he's continuing to walk, he's asking himself, so what are you doing? Not only you lying, yeah, and you stop putting on tefillin. So he decided, you know what? I'm going to go home. I have my tefillin. I'm going to put him on. So he went home and he put on tefillin. 10 years later, this person met Rabbi Katz again. And he told him, you should know that 10 years ago, I met you in the street. You asked me if I'm a Jewish. Told you I'm a Jewish. You asked me if I want to put on tefillin. Told you I put it this morning. I lied to you. But you should know that was from that day I put on tefillin every day of my life. And every time somebody tells you no, or he doesn't want to put on tefillin, and you feel discouraged, it says don't feel discouraged. It has an effect. Even though you might not know it as an effect, it says look at the effect. The only reason he says, I am putting on tefillin for the last 10 years, is why? It's because I told you I put on tefillin that morning when I didn't.